76ers fall to the Heat 99-90. And at this point, the season is over for the Philadelphia 76ers. And again, it ends in the second round. The second round. The Philadelphia 76ers can't get past the second round. Just can't do it. Just not happening. Just not getting done. And at the end of the day, this is clearly a disappointment. Another disappointment. Another disappointing end to the season for this ball club. A team that acquired James Harden in a mid-season trade. A team that had an MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid. A team that was built to win a championship. Not tomorrow, not next year, not the year after that. This team was built to win now. And ultimately, being built to win now, they just couldn't get it done. They were built to win now. The Sixers were put together, constructed to win now. The Sixers, James Harden, MVP caliber player, so we thought. But obviously, he didn't come up big for this team. He wasn't the scorer that the team thought they were acquiring. He wasn't the prolific scorer. He wasn't that league MVP. He wasn't that scoring champion that the 76ers thought they were acquiring. And the reality is, they had to hit on the Ben Simmons trade. When the Philadelphia 76ers made the trade of Ben Simmons, they had to hit on that trade. They had to get that trade right. They had to make sure that trade, whatever they got, the pieces that they got in that trade was right, was correct. It was the move that had to be right. And you can argue at this point, at this time, at this moment, that it wasn't the right move. You can argue at this point, this time, in this moment, that James Harden just isn't that guy anymore. I haven't seen anything, from James Harden that leads me to believe he is that guy. Obviously, if you're a Sixers fan, you were cautiously optimistic, but your eyes may not lie. And the reality is, will James Harden, is it a byproduct of him? He's battling a hamstring injury. Didn't appear to be in the greatest of shape. Was that a byproduct of that? What is it? Is he a step slow? Is he lost it? Is he losing a step? What is it? Why? And the reality is, you look at the Sixer team, and Jimmy Butler is on the other sideline on the Miami Heat. And Jimmy Butler probably should be still a Philadelphia 76er. They dropped the ball, right? They fell short. They dropped the ball, and it's tough. Because the reality is, when you had Jimmy Butler back in 2019, I think the thought process with the Sixers, and there were reports out there that Jimmy Butler and Brett Brown didn't necessarily get along. Obviously, it appeared that the 76ers, because you remember when Jimmy Butler was playing for the 76ers, in that second round series against the Toronto Raptors, the ball was in his hand quite often. Jimmy was facilitating, and Ben Simmons was sitting in the corner. So, and you look at Ben Simmons, he's not as an effective player when the ball's not in his hands, what makes what should be interesting to see what happens in Brooklyn with him. But, when the ball wasn't in his hand, he wasn't as effective. And so, yes, Ben Simmons has done well and improved on the defensive end, and it's a defensive player of the year type of player, right? But at the end of the day, the reality is he, in terms of the offense, and when the ball's not in his hand, he can't do much. He's ineffective. So you look at this Sixers season now, and I don't think there's any way you could slice it, cut it, no matter what you want to say about it. It's a disappointment. It's clearly a disappointment because, again, this team was built to win a championship. Now, you started to realize as the season went on, with the acquisition of James Harden, you realized that maybe a championship wasn't possible. And so, but at the end of the day, they had to hit on the Ben Simmons trade. They had to hit on that trade. And at this point, it appears maybe they haven't. It appears that they maybe have fell short in that particular trade. I don't know. But look, it's just disappointing because you get blown out in Miami. You get it. You understand, okay. You come back to your building and you get, pretty much blown out in that second half. You were listless in that second half. You played with no energy. Miami killed you on the offensive glass. The Miami Heat killed the Sixers on the offensive glass. They get offensive rebound after offensive rebound. They out-hustled this team. You get out hustled in your building in a game 6 with your season on the line. It's unacceptable. You cannot get out hustled when your season's on the line. The Miami Heat out hustled the Sixers. The Miami Heat outworked the Sixers. The Miami Heat wanted that game more. It was clear, it was obvious that they wanted the game more, and they played like it, and they showed it. They got the hustle, every 50-50 ball, the Miami Heat found a way to get it. They wanted this game more. They wanted to close out this series more than the Sixers wanted to keep this series going. That was clear. That was evident. That was obvious. And you look at the box score, and the one thing you look at this box score, you got to look at the second half, because at the end of the first half, Miami Heat had a 1-point lead, and then from there, the Sixers just came out with no energy in that third quarter. No energy. Miami led 49-48 at the half. You look at the third quarter. That's when this whole thing fell apart. Philadelphia got outscored 25-15 in that quarter. Jimmy Butler, who should be a Sixer at this point, they should never let the man get out of town. We'll get to that in a moment. But Jimmy Butler, 14 points in that third quarter. So he took over, and he's been taking over these past few games, right? What was he at? 73 points in games 3 and 4 in Philadelphia combined. Then he goes back to Miami, has a big game, and he comes back tonight with another big game. Jimmy Butler willed this team. Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat just wanted this thing more. And I don't think, if you're watching this basketball game, if that's not clear to you, I don't know what you're watching. It's very clear. It's very clear. And the Sixers, Hubie Brown pointed out they had no movement on offense. The offense was stagnant. Only person that really came to play in the second half was Shake Milton. Shake came off the bench and gave them some energy. That's it. And again, it fell apart in the third quarter. 28% from the field, 12% from downtown. So it all fell apart in that third quarter. You can't come out in a game 6 with your season on the line and have no energy. And then you're going to the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, you're down 11 to start the quarter. Doc Rivers is telling George Sedano, we're down 11. We're down 11, right? So there's time. Down 11, there's time. Yes, he's right. But then it takes Joel Embiid out to start the quarter. And I know Embiid, in terms of coming back from an injury and everything of that nature, but it's a game 6. So you take Embiid out to start the third quarter. Miami goes on a little run to start the third, push the 11-point lead to 17 points. You can't, in that situation, Miami, when Embiid went to the bench, Miami kept their killers on the court. And Adebayo was still on the court. Butler was still on the court. So, and the Sixers took their best player off the court at that moment, at that time. You can't do it. You can't do it at that moment, at that time, with your season on the line, down 11, going into the fourth. It's not like you had a lead. You were down 11 points. And Miami pushed that lead to 17, and that pretty much was it. Philadelphia made a little run at the end, but again, it was a wrap at that point. And it's just unacceptable for you, a team with championship aspirations, a team with championship hopes, a team that is constructed to win now, and you fall short. And it's not fault. You fall short, you get it. But it's how they fell short. You tied the series at 2 after game 4. James Harden has a 16-point fourth quarter, 31 points in that game 4. You're excited, you're happy, you're optimistic if you're a Sixers fan. You go to Miami, you lay an egg, you get blown out. You come back to your building in game 6, Sixers fans happy, hopeful, optimistic, and you get blown out in game 6. That's unacceptable. And that just is just an unacceptable situation for this team, for this ball club. And now they're going home. Going home with more questions than answers. James Harden, how much does he have left? James Harden, what? The guy took only 8 shots in this game. And you talk about, we talk about Allen Iverson and him taking a bunch of shots. And that's a skill. That's a skill set to be able to take a bunch of shots. It's a skill set. And clearly James Harden, who's a guy who has been a volume shooter, throughout the course of his career, just doesn't appear to have the ability to get shots off. James Harden doesn't have the ability to get shots off. It appears there's an issue, there's a problem. Is it a hamstring situation? Has he lost a step? What is it? Is he done? Is James Harden done? Now, I mean, you're almost, to a degree, you might be locked in. Now, maybe you hope that he opts in for the $47 million that he's owed next year. Just hope he opts in, and maybe you have some flexibility. But, I mean, it's a tough situation for this team. And Joel Embiid, he can't get off scot-free here either. I mean, at some moment, at some time, we got to put it on him as well. He's been the guy. He's been the constant. He's been here through this time. We've been trusting the process in Philly. Philly's been trusting the process. Trust the process. Trust the process, right? And Embiid's nickname is the process, right? But at the same time, the guy has come up. I mean, the injuries are the injuries. But a big part of ability is availability. And the reality is Joel Embiid has struggled with availability at important times. And those important times, games 1 and 2. And I'm not saying it's all his fault. I mean, it's a freak situation, with the orbital injury. But at the end of the day, it's an injury. And at the end of the day, we've seen this out of this guy, injury after injury. I mean, I think the reality is when it comes to Joel Embiid, it comes sometimes with this Sixer team, especially, 2019, I think they took this thing for granted. They thought, you know what, we'll be back. We're young. We're still young. We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back. But, there's only so many chances you get in this league to win a championship. And you look at the Sixers in 2019, that was their moment, their time. That was their moment. The Kawhi shot, the Kawhi bounced 50 times and went in. That was their moment. That was their time. That was their opportunity to win a championship. Because you look at it, it kind of opened up for them. You look at the situation with the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, that was a winnable situation for the Sixers in terms of winning that series against the Milwaukee Bucks in 2019, who the Raptors ultimately beat in the conference finals. But then ultimately the Raptors got to the NBA Finals, and Klay Thompson broke down. Kevin Durant broke down, and the championship opened wide open for them, and they took advantage of it. They seized the moment, and they won an NBA title. You look at the Sixers in 2019. You remember, after Game 3, they were up 2-1. Jimmy Butler was in the building. Jimmy Butler was on this team, up 2-1 against the Raptors in after Game 3. You go to Game 4, Joel Embiid calls in Brett Brown, I'm sick, yada, yada, yada. Comes out sick, doesn't play that well in Game 4. Game 5, he doesn't play that well. Ultimately, they win Game 6, and then Kawhi does what Kawhi does in Game number 7. But you had a moment, an opportunity, a situation to win an NBA title in 2019, and you fall short. It broke wide open for you. All you had to do was seize the moment, and they have not been able to seize the moment. You look at last year, number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. You look at last year, Game 5 against the Atlanta Hawks. Had a 20-point lead in that third quarter. Blew a 20-point lead. Lost that game to the Atlanta Hawks. Went to Atlanta, won the game, Game 6, took it to Game 7 in Philadelphia, a Game 7 in your building. History says Game 7 in your building, history is on your side. You should win that particular game. And they fall short, Game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks. We all know how with Ben Simmons in that particular situation, but you had home court advantage in that particular series. You were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference last year. So you had an opportunity, a moment to seize the moment and get to the NBA Finals. And once again, you fall short. So again, at some point, at some time, if you're the Sixers, do you think about trading Joel Embiid? Do you say, you know what? We've taken this as far as we can with Joel Embiid. We know he's going to put up some big numbers. We know he's going to do some beautiful, lovely, amazing things. But at the end of the day, can we trust that he can stay healthy enough for us to win an NBA title? And that's a question that they have to ask. Because you remember last year, Embiid got hurt against the Washington Wizards in that first round series, right? He did get hurt. I believe he missed Game 4. No, he missed Game 4 and 5, I believe. They closed it out in Game 5 without him against the Washington Wizards. But again, Embiid missed time last year in the playoffs. I mean, at some point, at some moment, at some time, we might have to just throw our hands up and say, this is who he is. Just like we say with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons would show those beautiful videos of him shooting baskets and during pickup, and you're like, oh my gosh, the guy's shooting. This is amazing. This is exciting. This is special. Oh my God, Ben Simmons is finally going to shoot. He's finally going to shoot jumpers. You thought that. You got excited. And then we all know what happened. The guy choked. The guy, for whatever reason, had some mental things going on. That's quite possible based on the way he played. Just didn't have the confidence. And ultimately, we all know what happened there. So we know what Ben Simmons is. Can we just say, is it time for us to say we know what Joel Embiid is? He's going to put up big-time numbers. Numbers are going to be great. Going to do some amazing things. You're going to say, wow, how can a 7'2" guy, 280 pounds, do all the amazing things that Joel Embiid does? How can he do it? He's going to do all these amazing, special, wonderful things. We're going to talk about him being MVP. We're going to talk about, he's going to be an MVP race and all that's good stuff. But at the end of the day, come playoff time, is he going to get hurt? I mean, that's what we see. That's his history. That's his history. Right? And I think Maya Angelou said this: if a person shows you who they are, you got to believe it. And that's not to take away anything from his competitive spirit, his competitive fire. He battled tonight, but he just didn't have it. He was willing. He shot the ball. He tried. He just didn't have it tonight. 7 for 24 from the field. He tried. But he didn't have it tonight, Joel Embiid. But at the end of the day, we got to talk about his injuries. We got to talk about his injury history. And we got to talk about and ask a question. Can you trust him? Do you trust him? And I think it's a legitimate question. Do you trust that Joel Embiid can stay healthy enough where he can win you an NBA title? Because it's a grind, winning all the games you need to win, 16 games to win an NBA title. That's a grind. And that's a grind. You got to battle, you got to work, and ultimately you got to stay healthy. Health has to be on your side. And Joel Embiid, health has not been on his side throughout the course of his career. He's going to end his career being he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. But you almost wonder, right? I think clearly he played, 70-plus games, and I think the thought process is, we got to do what we got to do to get this guy an MVP. We got to give him an MVP. Let's get him out there. But maybe he's got to be managed. Maybe he's just got to be managed like he has been in previous years. Load management when it comes to this guy to make sure he can get through a playoff, because that's what matters. That's what's important, right? You remember the Toronto Raptors when they won Kawhi Leonard in 2019? It was load management. They load managed Kawhi beautifully, lovely, amazingly, and ultimately he was healthy enough to lead that team to an NBA title. And if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, I know Embiid wanted the MVP really, really bad. It was clear he wanted the MVP. He said it. He wanted it. That was one of his goals. He wanted to be an MVP of this league. And I think he should have been, but he wasn't. But at the end of the day, it's not about MVPs. It's about championships. It's about being available during the playoffs, being healthy during the playoffs so you can win this team a championship. And again, we could call the situation, his injury, his latest injury, a freak situation with the orbital bone. Sure, it was. But at the end of the day, guys find ways to stay on the court. Michael Jordan found ways to stay on the court to win a championship 6 times. I'm not comparing Embiid to Michael Jordan, but you get my point. Ultimately, Shaq, who was a big like Joel Embiid, stayed healthy enough to win 4 NBA titles. You also had Kobe Bryant, who was a very great player, and obviously you had Dwayne Wade as well. But he stayed. But they needed him, and those Laker teams they were Shaq's teams. They needed him, right? And so you got to stay healthy, and the Sixers, they got to ask that question. It's a big question. It's a huge question. What do you do with this team? You got to figure out James Harden. I mean, Daryl Morey obviously loved James Harden, wanted James Harden. Clearly, that was his target, and ultimately he got him. But he may have gotten him too late. I will say this. James Harden probably with a full training camp with this ball club, full season, I think he can average 20 points and 10 assists. I think he can do that. I think he can. Right? I think, and I think you would be okay with that. But the question becomes, if you got to give this dude supermax money where you're paying him $61 million at age 37 years old, that's not going to be pretty. Unless he ages like CP3, Chris Paul, who's 37, and still getting it done at a high level. So unless he ages like that, unless he ages like fine wine, which I don't know if Harden is going to age like fine wine. Obviously, clearly, he wasn't in the greatest of shape, it appeared coming into this season. And it just, he might make that commitment in the offseason and say, you know what, let's just say he decides to opt in. He says, I'm opted in for this contract, making $47 million next year. I'm going to come in tip-top shape, big-time shape, amazing shape, so I can get that next payday. Or, at the end of the day, he has the leverage at this point. He has the leverage. Will there be somebody who's willing to pay James Harden, millions upon millions of dollars in max contract? Yeah, maybe, probably, sure. There might be a market out there. We don't know what the market's going to be for James Harden. But it's clear that the Sixers, they might be stuck with this guy, and they might have to try to figure it out. It's almost like, and I'm not saying this to this extreme, but when they acquired Chris Webber, many moons ago, remember, I think that was, 2001, 2? No, that wasn't 2001 or 2. That was like 2004, I believe, off the top of my head. But when they acquired Chris Webber, well, there was a lot of excitement, Iverson and Webber together, yada, 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 yada. But Webber was shot. He was shot. He had no knees. His mobility was shot. He wasn't the same player. And it appears at this point, at this time, at this moment, James Harden, it doesn't appear to be the same player. Doesn't appear to be the same player. And he gave up a lot to get him. In terms of draft picks, in terms of guys who helped you, in terms of Steph Curry and Andre Drummond. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not saying, So the reality is Philadelphia is in a tough spot. They're in a tough spot. And again, you can't slice it any other way to say this is a disappointment. And just, again, the way you lose. You didn't show up in games 5 and 6, right? You battled back in games 3 and 4. You got your big guy back. You got Embiid back. There was excitement. And again, you come out in 5 and 6 and lay eggs. You laid 2 eggs in game 5, another egg in game 6. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable, okay? And does Doc Rivers, do they look at making a change for Doc Rivers? Doc Rivers wasn't, Daryl Morey's guy. So do they make that change? Is Doc Rivers going to be gone? Who knows? But Philadelphia, to lose the way they lost, to get blown out essentially in their building, to get beat down essentially in their building, to get outworked essentially in their building. It's unacceptable. You can't lose the hustle stats when your backs are against the wall. You got to be the desperate team. You got to lay it on the line. And I didn't see any desperation tonight from the 76ers. You didn't see much desperation. You didn't see it at all. And I think that makes it even more disappointing. That the effort wasn't there. Your energy wasn't there. None of that was there tonight. And that is unacceptable. You can blame Doc for not having these guys, for these guys not bringing the energy. But at the end of the day, look, these boys are pros. And at the end of the day, these boys are wanting to get a championship. And look, you look at Jimmy Butler. And, Andrew Klein, you make a good point. Jimmy wanted us. Choosing Ben over Jimmy sent this franchise back 15 years. It sent him back. Jimmy Butler, who would you rather have, James Harden or Jimmy Butler? Don't answer that because the answer is clear. It's rhetorical. That's a rhetorical question at this point. And at the time, you're right, they chose Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler, right? But Ben Simmons, here's the thing with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons couldn't do the things that Jimmy Butler does. Ben Simmons can't score the way Jimmy Butler can score. You saw Jimmy Butler at times facilitate. And you look at 2019 with the Sixers, he was facilitating. He was running, he was the point guard. He was bringing the ball up, bringing his team and setting his team up in the offense, and Ben was in the corner. I said this team, again, had to hit on that Ben Simmons trade. And it appears at this point they didn't hit on that Ben Simmons trade. It appears they got a James Harden who might be done. Now I'm going to say he's done. I'm not going to say he's done, but he ain't what he was. But he's not done. But he's just not who they need him to be, who they thought they were getting, who they wanted him to be. He's not that. But yes, Jimmy Butler should be in a Sixers uniform. Jimmy Butler, instead of having red on, should have had blue on. Should have had blue on. He should have had the blue on. Jimmy Butler is a stud. He's a stud. He get his own shot in the elite level. Can facilitate, play defense. He does it all. And when he was with the Sixers, he made a lot of big shots. And so Jimmy Butler is big time. And the funny part is, a lot of Sixers fans at the time when Jimmy went to Miami, well, they were saying, well, he's going to go to a situation where it's not going to be as good as what he had in Philly. But he ultimately helped turn that thing around, Jimmy Butler. And so Miami ultimately gave him max dollars, gave him big time money recently, right? So Jimmy Butler is huge. Jimmy Butler is big time. Jimmy Butler is a stud. And he showed that in this series. He showed that in these last, 4 games where he put up big time numbers. He took control of the game, was in control of the game. Embiid loved Jimmy Butler, clearly loved Jimmy Butler. He said it numerous times. He loved him. And I thought at the time, you know what? When they had Butler and Tobias and Ben Simmons, let's run this back. Let's try to run this back. Let's run it back. Let's run that 2019 back. And they decided, you know what? We don't want Jimmy. And again, there were reports, Jimmy and Brett Brown didn't necessarily get along. Who knows what's true in that situation? And, maybe they chose Jimmy over Brett Brown over Jimmy at the time to a degree. And we all know how that turned out. But at the end of the day, what transpired here with the Philadelphia 76ers and this process, the process at the end of the day, the process was put together to win a championship. And you could argue the guy that was constructing the process, Sam Hinkie, didn't get an opportunity, moment, or time to put this thing all together and figure this whole thing out and bring this into a championship puzzle, put the championship pieces together. And he didn't get that moment. He didn't get that time. They went to Brian Colangelo. Brian Colangelo had a burner account on Twitter, allegedly. You're right. He had all that going on. And it all fell apart from there. But, and also you look at Markelle Fultz and, not hitting there. They had the assets, right? They had the assets to figure this thing out and get this thing right. And they messed up on Markelle Fultz. That didn't work out for him. Another guy that, struggled with some mental things. Ultimately, he was hurt with his shoulder and things of that nature. But that didn't work. And, you look at Ben Simmons, struggled with some mental things. Number 1 overall pick, a guy that many had high hopes for. And he felt it didn't work. He just never elevated his game. And Philadelphia, the process, you can argue at this point, if the process doesn't equal a championship, it wasn't a success. And that's, if it doesn't equal championship, it's not a success. And I was one of these guys who didn't have a problem with the process. I was okay with the process. You lose a few times, you get a few high draft picks, and you figure it out. And they did that, and they hit on Embiid. You can argue they got lucky on Embiid because you remember, Embiid, many thought was going to be the number 1 overall pick that particular year. He had the situation with his back and the uncertainty with the back and the foot and everything going on there. And he ultimately fell to them in 3. So they got lucky there. Obviously they took Ben Simmons. And, at the time it appeared to be the right pick. Some people were calling for Brandon Ingram at the time. But it appeared that Ben Simmons was the right pick at that moment, at that time. And, he turned himself into he's a 3-time All-Star, Ben Simmons. Arguably, should have won Defensive Player of the Year last year. So he's not a scrub. Ben Simmons is not a scrub by no stretch of the imagination. I've said this numerous times, and you might call me crazy, but Ben Simmons, if he continued being what he was and doing what he was doing, he would have turned out to be a Hall of Famer because I think ultimately he would have won a Defensive Player of the Year award. He's still a 3-time All-Star. So at this point, and if he would have stayed with the Sixers, maybe with that current role that he had, probably would have made some more All-Star games. So the reality is, Ben Simmons is a guy who could have easily and still may easily become a Hall of Famer in this league. It's just a reality. You might call me crazy, but think about it. 3 All-Stars, appearances, defensive player of the year. He didn't win it, but he, in the mix, and maybe could have won it at some point, sometime. And maybe he still will win it at some point in some time when Brooklyn or wherever else he's going to be. But, at the end of the day, Ben Simmons has a winning skill set, and you can win with Ben Simmons. I said that numerous times, and I'll repeat myself numerous times. You can win with Ben Simmons. That skill set is a winning skill set. What he brings to the table is winning in terms of his, defense, in terms of his passing ability, his ability to get to the lane. Only thing Ben Simmons can do is shoot. And that's big. It's not just, it's not a little thing. It's a big thing that he can't shoot. But the guy has a decent skill set. And again, you look at last year, Philadelphia, you can't get out of the second round. And again, the only constant, Ben Simmons is not here right now, so is Joel Embiid. So, as a superstar, when things are going well, people, big you up, celebrate you, and love you. But when you fall as a superstar, well, all the fingers get pointed at you, and rightfully so. So every finger should be pointed at Joel Embiid to a degree. We got to point the finger at him. We got to point the finger at Joel Embiid because he wasn't healthy. We got to point the finger at Joel Embiid. We have to, because he hasn't been healthy over these years. We have to point the finger at him. It's not all his fault, right? But we got to point the finger at him. And so the Sixers, and again, this is, how many times, you keep getting second round. You got to figure it out. And last year was a little bit more egregious than last year was a lot more egregious than this year, because last year you had a home court advantage. Last year you had a 20-point game in Game 5 in your building and you blew it. Last year, Game 7 in your building and you blew it. So last year was a lot more unacceptable than this year. This year is unacceptable. This is a disappointment. This is clearly a disappointment. And if you're not disappointed as a Sixers fan, I don't know what to say. You got to be disappointed. Second round is unacceptable. Remember, you started out the situation, 2018, the first year you made the playoffs with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. You beat the Miami Heat in that first round, and then you lose to the Celtics in 5. Again, a very winnable series at the time. Remember, Boston was battling some injuries there. So that was a very winnable series for the Sixers, and they couldn't get it done. Boston, and then Boston was in their head for a few years, and then then you had the 2019 ultimately Kawhi shot. 2020, the bubble situation, Ben Simmons gets hurt, they get swept by the Celtics. Then last year, we know what happened last year. Game 7, losing to Atlanta Hawks. Ben Simmons choking. Ben Simmons, having a mental breakdown, a mental collapse. And then, this year, you made the trade for James Harden in the midseason. You're saying, okay, this is the piece. This is going to be that final piece. This is the dude that they need, a prolific scorer, an elite player off the dribble, a closer, if you will. And he was not that. He was not that. Remember the first couple games that started out, Sixers fans were excited. James Harden came out, put up some big-time numbers, did some big-time things, and, did some things we haven't seen from a point guard in Philadelphia for many years. And then, as it went on, you started to notice, like, wow, this guy can't get by people like he used to. What's up? He can't get by people like he used to. He's not finishing like he used to. What's going on here? Something not right with this guy? Is it the hamstring not right? Has he lost his step? You started asking questions. And then, as the thing progressed, you're like, well, this is who he is. He's still an elite passer, still a guy who can, set up an offense and run an offense, still put up some decent numbers. But this ain't Houston James Harden by no means. This ain't that dude. This ain't that guy. This ain't the guy who led the league in assists that one year and, points and all that. This is not MVP James Harden. This is not him. This is not him. And so it became clear, it became evident, it became obvious that James Harden has lost his step, or he's hurt, or he's not in shape. You decide. Maybe it's all of the above. Who knows? But they got to figure it out. And again, I think you're almost tied to James Harden to a degree. Maybe you could say, you know what? We're not going to give you, a Supermax contract, 5 years, X amount of money. Let's do like a 3-year, 150-something thing. Let's do something like that. Let's do something like that, short-term situation. But maybe there's going to be somebody out there that might say, you know what? Nah, we'll give you more than that. We'll give you a longer term deal than that. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But it's a disappointing situation. It's a disappointing season for the Philadelphia 76ers. And again, just like previous years, it ended in the second round. Ended in the second round. And they lost to Jimmy Butler. And I guess that if you're a Sixers fan, it kind of hurts even more because of what Jimmy Butler, where Jimmy Butler should be. Jimmy Butler should be a 76ers, right? They give Tobias all that money. Maybe that money should have went to Jimmy Butler. Probably should have went to Jimmy Butler, right? Because everything that Ben Simmons wasn't, right? Because here's the thing about Ben Simmons. He did a lot well, but he wasn't a closer. Jimmy Butler's a closer. Jimmy Butler can get his shot in any shot. And that was clear and that was obvious during this series and these last few games. That's been clear and obvious throughout the course of his career. And so Jimmy Butler gets buckets. Jimmy Buckets gets buckets. He gets buckets. He's gotten buckets and continues to get buckets and is a bucket getter. And that was clear in this series. And so you're the Sixers and you're seeing James Harden turn the ball over at an alarming rate. You see James Harden not being able to get by P.J. Tucker. You see James Harden just struggling with his shot. You see James Harden shoot only 9 times in this game. You see all that, and you're like, man, Jimmy Butler should be on our roster. You're like, man, this is what we gave Ben Simmons up and Seth Curry and Andre Drummond up and the draft picks up. This is what we gave up for this. For 0 points in the second half, we gave up that for this. I mean, man, like you look at it, it's like this is what we did. This is what we gave up for a guy that can't get his shot off. Right, 4 for 7 in the first half, 11 points, 5 assists for James Harden, and then and you look at the end box score. Doesn't get much better. It ends at, 11 points. Disappointing. It ends at 9 assists, 4 turnovers, 4 rebounds. It ends with him getting outworked multiple times by P.J. Tucker. It ends with him not, obviously getting blown past on the defensive end. It ends with a disappointing 99-90 loss in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. The Sixers have been to this spot many times, and the Sixers have fallen short many times. What can they do to get over the hump? They need their center Embiid to be healthy. They need a healthy Embiid, clearly, right? Maxey obviously is a guy that you're excited about going forward. We saw the promise. We saw the shot making. We saw the athleticism. Maxey and the work, and more importantly, there seems to be a nice character piece there with him because he's putting the work in. He put the work in, and he got better. Tyrese Maxey got better from a year ago. So you're hoping that he continues to elevate his game and continues to get better. Tobias Harris, he's making a lot of money. You might be stuck there with that contract. And so in terms of trading him, there might not be a market for him. But Tobias wasn't bad. He wasn't bad in these playoffs and didn't have a bad year. Right? But you're probably stuck there with Tobias Harris. Embiid, is he the guy that you want to continue to build your franchise around, knowing his injury history? 28 years old, Joel Embiid. You got to figure out that because we all know what happened over the years in terms of the injuries. Is he the guy that you want to build around? I guess they're probably going to continue to build with Embiid and try to win a championship with him going forward. So, they got to figure this thing out. They got to figure this thing out. And I don't, they got to build a champ. They brought Daryl Morey in to build a championship caliber team. And Morey, had some success in Houston, but he didn't build a championship caliber team. Got close, but it didn't happen. So, again, he's a guy heavy on the analytics and things of that nature. But, they got to figure it out. And Morey, he's got to build this roster and build this roster up. And again, he's a guy who's in love with James Harden. Understandably so, in terms of, because they had success together. And you thought, Morey, if there's one guy who knows if James Harden may be finished or not, it's Daryl Morey. And again, maybe he says, this guy isn't finished. And I'm not saying he's finished. The finished is too strong of a word when it comes to James Harden. But he's not who we thought the Sixers were getting. I think they thought they were getting a little more. He can't blow by nobody. He's got a difficult time blowing by people. And here's the thing, James Harden never was the most athletic of dudes. I mean, he wasn't the most athletic guy out there. James Harden wasn't the most athletic guy. But again, it appears at this point in this time, he's a step slower. He's a step slower. Whatever, the athleticism that he did have doesn't seem he has no longer. So it is a difficult situation for the Sixers. I thought last year, at the end of last year, they were in a better position than they were at the end of this year. Because at the end of last year, right, you still had a decent roster. You still had the Currys of the world who, again, some shot making there. But you still had a decent roster. And you still were hoping that Ben Simmons would continue or possibly try to elevate his game. So they were in a better position last year than they were going into this. Last summer, they were in a better position than they are this summer. And, look at last year, the whole COVID situation. It was just a weird year. Doc Rivers' first year with the franchise. Just a weird year. 2020 last year was a weird year for a lot of reasons. But, this year, and again, the COVID is still hanging over all of us. And I don't know if COVID is going anywhere for another year or so. We still might be dealing with COVID for some time at this point. So, there's always going to be guys missing time because of COVID. You can't do anything about that. But last year was weird, and this year was a little better. But at the end of the day, you look at this Sixer team, you look at this roster, and Brooklyn, say what you will about what happened with Ben Simmons and all that, Brooklyn has a championship caliber roster next year. They'll probably because they'll have a training camp together to get everybody acclimated, to get Ben Simmons acclimated, get Ben Simmons healthy, comfortable, and things of that nature. Maybe, hopefully mentally and physically for Ben Simmons. So Brooklyn is going to be a formidable opponent, a formidable team next season. Brooklyn's going to be good. They're going to be good. So, this was a moment for the Sixers to take advantage of. I mean, Miami clearly was better, but I don't think Miami was head and shoulders. I think it was ultimately you got to say Miami's better because they won the series. But I'm not sitting here walking away from this saying Miami is clearly better. I mean, because you could argue if Embiid was healthy for games 1 and 2, maybe the Sixers still won in game 1 and 2. Maybe they still won in game 1 or 2 because Embiid was rolling, because, he had a situation with the hand. But in that game 6, he was rolling. He balled out in that game 6. He had the thumb, I should say. He balled out in game 6. And so maybe the thought was, okay, Embiid was rolling, and then he got, the can't even talk. He fractures the orbital bone, right? Broke his face, basically. And you're just like, wow, man, all that momentum, you're taking from the Toronto series, and then you kind of lose the momentum, and then Embiid you miss game 1 and 2, you're getting back in 3 and 4, you win games 3 and 4, and you're thinking, okay, maybe. But then you lay an egg in 5, lay an egg in game 6, and it all falls apart. It all falls apart for you, for your team, for the franchise. And now you're on the outside looking in. You're going home for another summer. Again, Doc Rivers and the media, they ain't always get along, it appeared. Last year Doc Rivers was saying, well, he's asked the question straight up, can you win a championship with Ben Simmons? Well, maybe we have to ask Doc Rivers this question. Can you win a championship with James Harden as your point guard? I mean, it's a legitimate question. And if James Harden isn't James Harden, if James Harden is a step slower, I mean, here's the thing. You knew with James Harden, you wasn't getting a guy who could defend. You weren't getting an elite defender. That was clear. You weren't getting an elite defender with James Harden. but you thought you got, buckets galore. You thought you thought you had a guy who get buckets. And again, he could still, as we saw in Game 4, 16-point fourth quarter, 31-point game. You said, well, we saw him get buckets, but that was it. That was it. That was the last hurrah for the Sixer team. After that, no one. They just laid eggs. They laid eggs. And Embiid came out aggressive. There was talk. Charles Barkley was like, well, him not getting the MVP, I think that's bothering him. I think that's affecting his performance. I don't know. I don't know about that. But I will say in Game 5 and Game 6 tonight, he came out aggressive, right? 7 for 24 from the field. Just wasn't making shots, but he came out aggressive. He came out with the mindset that my season's on the line, and I'm going to do what I got to do to get us over the hump. He came out with that level of aggression. But again, it wasn't clearly enough. It wasn't enough. There was no shot making. He didn't make shots. And that's it. That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. They didn't make shots. And that's it. That's it. You didn't make shots in that third quarter. And you didn't make shot to get a win. And that's the bottom line. And now you are on the outside looking in, and your season is over. Let's look at this. James Harden, Kyle Newback, who covers the Sixers for the Philly Voice. Harden was asked if he would take less on an extension, whatever it takes to help this team continue to grow. So, maybe that's, some optimism. Maybe James Harden is not going to kill this team in terms of an extension. But at the end of the day, if you're James Harden, well, this is your last opportunity pretty much to get that big contract, you could argue. So maybe he's going to try to cash in. Maybe that's just end of the year talk at this point. But, he says, whatever it takes to help this team win. Harden was asked, will he opt in? I'll be here. He goes on to say he'll do whatever it takes to win here and make the team as good as it can possibly be. So Harden says he will opt in. Well, he says he'll be here. That doesn't mean he'll opt in. That doesn't mean anything. But he says he will be in Philadelphia. And, whether he opts in, whether he gets a new contract, we'll see. And again, I'm not one of these, I'm not I don't know if James Harden is James Harden, the James Harden of the past. I think we can argue we can make a legitimate case that he's not James Harden who we thought he was, the guy who put up, got buckets and did all these amazing things in Houston. I don't think he's that guy anymore. But at the same time, it's always hard to make a midseason trade the way the Sixers did and get a guy on the same page with everybody. That's hard. That's not easy to do. And again, maybe a full offseason when he's in better shape, when he's completely healthy, maybe that will make a difference. We'll see. But it does appear that there's a step that is lost when it comes to James Harden. But again, he says he'll be in Philadelphia next year, so whether that's opting in, whether that's an extension, he says he will be in Philadelphia. Well, James Harden wasn't very aggressive in the second half, as we discussed. 11 points in the first half, 0 in the second half, only 9 shots in total. Harden on his lack of attempts in the second half. We run our offense. The ball just didn't get back to me. You're the point guard. You're the guy who you get the ball, take the ball, be aggressive, do what you got to do to help your ball club win. Right? Go balls to the wall and see what happens. And, one thing we'll say, again, Allen Iverson didn't always shoot the greatest of percentages, but man, he went after it. He did whatever he had to do to help his team win. And man, he went after it. Doc Rivers. I came to the conclusion at the end of this game that we were just not good enough to beat Miami. That's a tough pill to swallow, I think, if you're a Sixers fan. because you felt like this team was built to win a championship, built to win now. And to say that you're not good enough to beat the Miami Heat in this particular series, that's tough. That's tough. And I mean, at the end of the day, you can't argue uh, with the results. You can't argue with the results. I mean, the results are the results. The 4-2 get blown out in game 5 and essentially getting blown out in game number 6. And Tobias Harris, in terms of the second half, Harris was asked what went wrong in the second half. Starts with this, truthfully, just a lack of effort on our part. A lack of effort on your part in game 6 with your backs against the wall, with your season on the line, and you come out with a lack of effort. I can understand if you were up 3-2, maybe up 3-2, you come out with a lack of effort, a little more acceptable. But when your backs are against the wall and your season's on the line, and you come out with that type of effort, where Miami's outworking you on the offensive glass, Miami's getting all the 50-50 balls, and you come out with that effort, a lack of effort, I mean, is that on your coach? Is that on your players? That's on everybody. Everybody's got to, put their hands in there and take blame for what transpired tonight. I mean, it's easy to blame the coach for not getting the team, up and ready for this game. But these guys get paid a boatload of money, and this is game 6 with your season on the line, and you let a team like them, you get outworked. They want it more than you. You can't go to sleep. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable, and I don't know how you can sleep well in that particular situation. I just don't know how you can. Tobias Harris, who says he believes their group is good enough to win together, cites one factor as the biggest difference to make the leap to the next level: mental toughness. Miami was the mentally tougher team tonight. That was clear, that was evident, that was obvious. They were the mentally tougher team throughout the course of this series. And mental toughness, makes you get that 50-50 ball. Mental toughness, makes you outwork your opponent. Mental toughness, just makes you just place your will on the other team and break their backs. Mental toughness is getting it done on the defensive end. And Jimmy Butler said, you know what? You remember what Jimmy Butler said at the end of game 5, right? He said he was not happy because he felt like it took the team to make a bunch of shots in order to win. His thing is we needed to be better on the defensive end. He wanted the Heat to be better on the defensive end, and they were. The Miami Heat were better on the defensive end tonight. Sixers shot only 41% from the field, 12 for 37 from downtown, 32%. Miami forced 13 turnovers, which led to 22 points, right? So all those things, man, that's working against you. And so mental toughness. Well, you got veterans in that locker room. You would think there would be a level of mental toughness. I mean, Joel Embiid and James Harden, they've been doing this thing for a little bit now, right? Tobias, he's been doing this thing for a little bit now. I mean, this is not a young squad. This is a veteran-laden team. And for you to say that you don't have the mental toughness and they need the mental toughness to get to that next level, that's just unacceptable, man. That's just unacceptable. And again, they got to take that leap. At some point, we're expecting the Sixers to take the leap, and the leap is the Eastern Conference Finals. The leap is an NBA title. And when are going to make that leap? Or are these guys the guys who can make that leap? I don't know. But Doc Rivers, he said at the end of this series, he felt like Miami was just a better team. And at the end of the day, you got to just stand on that. Miami was the better team. They played like the better team. They wanted it more. And ultimately, they got it. They wanted this game more. They were saying, you know what? We're not going back to Miami for game 7. We're not doing that. We're ending this right here, right now. We're coming to Philadelphia, and we're ending this series in their building. Period. Point blank. So, fellas, let's get this done now. Let's get win this series, get a little bit of rest, and rest up for our next opponent because we ain't going back to Miami. At least we're not going back to Miami to play the 76ers. And that's what they said in their minds, and that's what it showed on the court. They went out there and out fought the Sixers. They out hustled the Sixers, out scrapped the Sixers. They out everything when it came to the Sixers tonight. And again, 1 point lead at halftime. Second half, they go on. They just dominated. They dominate the second half. Defensive end, they dominated. They limited the Sixers. And Jimmy Butler was Jimmy Butler, 14 points in that third quarter. Jimmy Butler he came out, set the tone early, and he set the tone throughout. And now he's going to the Eastern Conference Finals. And, here's the thing. Jimmy Butler, he left Philadelphia, went to Miami, went to the finals in 2020, led that team in the final in the bubble. And then, now this year, at least got them to the Eastern Conference Finals. And Miami has a legitimate shot to go to the NBA Finals. They got home court advantage, so that helps. Whether they play Boston or Milwaukee, I think Milwaukee looks like they're going to get back to the finals. They look like they're going to get back to the finals, but we'll see. But Miami does have Miami does have a home court advantage, so that helps. That does help. Just read some of the things that these guys are saying, right? In terms of effort, in terms of all that. That's tough, man. That is tough. That's tough. And again, James Harden, the ball just didn't get back to me. Take that ball, James. Grab that ball. Take the ball. Dominate. Put the ball between your legs 50 times and get to the lane and finish. That's what the Sixers brought you here for. They ain't bring you here for you to be a lockdown defender. They didn't bring you here really to be just a facilitator. They brought you here to get buckets. They brought you here to put the ball between your legs 50 times and make a three. They brought you here to finish. They brought you here to do all that. They didn't bring you here just to facilitate and look cute. 11 points, 9 assists, 4 for 9 for the field in the closeout game. It's not acceptable. May not be all on you, but it's not acceptable. Embiid talked about, James Harden being aggressive. That's what we brought him here for. Yada, yada, yada. And, clearly he was not that tonight. And again, the ball just didn't get back to me. We run our offense. The ball just didn't get back to me. That's that. I guess as simple as that. He didn't get the ball. He didn't get the ball back. He wanted the ball back. Didn't get the ball back. Couldn't get the ball back. Wouldn't get the ball back. The ball just didn't get back to me. I don't know if that's acceptable. I don't know if that's something that, if you're a Sixers fan, you're comfortable with that. I don't know. But again, as he said, asked if he'll opt in, he said at the end of the day, I'll be here. And he says he'll do whatever it takes to win here and make the team as good as it can possibly be. So he's saying he's going to do all these things. Whatever that looks like. Whatever that looks like. Do you believe him? We'll see. We'll see. But again, clearly what people saw from James Harden this season in terms of the Sixers, a little bit of a disappointment. And not a little bit, a lot of a disappointment. Right? And then you got James Harden. Jay Wright out here, right? Jay Wright, he didn't rule out anything in terms of the NBA. He didn't rule that out. But he retired from Villanova. Maybe fire Doc and bring Jay Wright. And who knows if that would even make a difference. Jay Wright went on the college level. Who knows if he can win on the NBA level? Who knows if he can be successful in the NBA level? Who knows about all that, right? And I know a lot of people want to quick to go after Doc Rivers, right? Doc has had a lot of success in this league. You could question some of the situations in terms of him and the Clippers not getting it done after they had opportunities to get it done. It seemed like numerous times, even here in Philadelphia last year, where you're the number one seed, where you had a 20-point lead against the Hawks in Game 5, opportunity to go up 3-2, right? And you blow it, and then a few games later in Game 7, you blow it, you lose Game 7 in your building. So Doc, we could say a lot about Doc because Doc has come up short on last year they came up short. Um, you know, just frustrated with the lack of effort. Tyler, I think and that's a fair frustration because the effort was lacking. That's a fair frustration because they did get outworked. That's a fair frustration because they got killed on the offensive glass. All those things, just that's getting outworked. Not getting, losing out on the 50-50 balls. That's getting outworked. And that's got to be frustrating. And I think the frustrating part is not only, what happened tonight, but what also happened in Game 5. And how, they didn't show up in Game 5. They didn't show up in Game 5. Tonight, they showed up a little bit. But in the second half, it's odd to think that a team, would want a team, with their backs against the wall, would come out with a better effort. A team with their backs against the wall, right? You wouldn't expect, Tobias Harris to come out and say, well, what happened in the second half? Truthfully, just a lack of effort on our part. You can't, that can't be acceptable. And him saying that, it's the truth, it's reality, it's real. But man, that's a tough pill to swallow. You're getting outworked and, just a lack of effort. I mean, talent is talent. Making baskets is making baskets. But at the end of the day, you can't get outworked, right? Your effort has to be grade A, has to be top notch, has to be at 100%, 110% because it's a closeout situation. And for you to say, he's being honest, but truthfully, just a lack of effort on our part, that's a kick in the teeth. That's a gut punch. It's a body shot. It's a crippling body shot to hear something like that. Because it's not, you expect to hear that in the regular season, right? Game 76, game 42, game 33 of the regular season, but not game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. Not game 6 when you're trailing 3-2. Not that. So to hear that, it's clearly troubling. To hear that is clearly disappointing. To hear that it is, to Tyler's point, frustrated. And yes, you talked about it. P.J. Tucker. P.J. Tucker did outwork him. You saw P.J. Tucker had some tip-ins there, had that lay-in there. I mean, it's getting multiple possessions for this team. I mean, the effort on the part of this team is just unacceptable. It just can't be. It's just not acceptable. And Doc says at the end, he concludes that the Miami Heat were the better team, and maybe that's the case. Maybe that's true, right? We can all agree that's the case. I mean, yes, they had a better regular season record, and ultimately they beat the Sixers 4-2. You could argue again it's a different series if Embiid is here for all 6 games, and I like to think it would be a different series. I don't know if the Sixers will win, but I know they would at least have taken this. This thing would have at least went to 7, right? But even if you lost in 7, you still lost. There is no moral victories at this point when it comes to this team. Remember 2019, Embiid is in there crying and whatnot. And I'm not saying Embiid didn't do his part, in this particular game. He tried. 7 for 24, the shots just weren't going in for him. But and his effort was there. His effort was there, and clearly Embiid came into this season in tip-top shape, in good shape. He was in good shape this year. Embiid was in good shape, and obviously had an MVP caliber season. Obviously, clearly had an MVP caliber season. But at the end of the day, he came up short. The Sixers came up short. Doc Rivers came up short. Everybody came up short. Brad Turner, he covers the Lakers. He says James Harden has been a ghost in this game, just 9 shots, making 4, looking disinterested all game. James Harden sometimes he did look disinterested at times, but I don't know. He did look disinterested. I mean, I don't think we could argue with that, but more than 9 shots, you would expect James Harden to score or shoot more 9 times. You would expect James Harden to have more than 11 points in a closeout situation. You would expect James Harden maybe to have a little bit more energy. Just got outworked. PJ Tucker was outworking him on the glass. You saw him just chase down balls. And it just, PJ Tucker, guys like PJ Tucker's a winning player, right? Won a championship with the Bucks. He's a winning player. He's a championship caliber player. He's that guy. He's a glue guy. He's a hard worker. He's a solid role player, right? But again, you just can't get outworked. It's okay for somebody to outshoot you, right? But you cannot get outworked. You cannot get outworked. And the Sixers got outworked tonight. They got outworked tonight. And I think that's a disappointing part. That's one of the disappointing parts of this whole thing. And Doc says again, Miami was a better team. Fine, we can if we all walk away from it and say Miami's a better team. Fine, I think we all can live with that. I don't think what we can live with is the effort. We can't. I don't think any of us can live with that effort. I think we all can live with Miami being a better team. Fine, we can. That's cool. Whatever, right? But if your effort ain't right, if you're not doing what you need to do in terms of going after those 50-50 balls, going hard in a closeout situation, well, that's just you can't. That can't be respected. That can't be accepted, and it's something that's clearly a disappointment. But now that the Sixers go home, and they got to figure it out. Embiid will get his face fixed. You look at Embiid, his thumb, he'll get that all fixed up. Do we try to shop Tobias Harris for another superstar? Here's the tough part about Tobias Harris, and that money, he's making a lot of money. That contract, it's a big contract. You hope that Springer, the number 1 pick, their first round pick last season, and Bassey, you hope these guys in the offseason will be in position where they can take that next step because they needed a backup center, right? They needed some guy. And I'm not saying Paul Reed was terrible, but, I mean, Bassey, who's a shot blocker, solid defender. And you're hoping Springer can take that next step, correct? You're hoping that's the case. But who knows, right? The bench definitely wasn't the greatest for the 76ers. But they got to figure it out. I think you can. If James Harden is who we or the Sixers hope that he can be, I think you're okay with Tobias Harris. But I don't know, again, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people knocking down your door to get Tobias Harris. They're not knocking down your door to get Tobias Harris. That contract is big. That contract is large. And again, Tobias Harris ain't bad. But people look at Tobias Harris's game, and they always look at the contract. And it's kind of similar to many years ago. Remember when Andre Iguodala had a big contract with the 76ers? And Andre Iguodala wasn't bad, right? But, obviously, because the money he was making, everybody was complaining about what he brought to the table. And obviously, he was in a role where, he was, at the time, arguably maybe the best player on that team, right? At least paid like it. But a lot of people didn't necessarily look at the things that what he did bring to the table. And you can win with Andre Iguodala, as we've seen when he went to Golden State. Now, again, it does help to have a Klay Thompson around. It does help to have a Steph Curry around. It does help, have a Draymond Green around, right? But Andre Iguodala has demonstrated that he is a winning player and maybe possibly a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done, a Finals MVP under his belt. But you look at Tobias Harris, it ain't that bad when it comes to Tobias Harris and what he brings to the table. It's just we're looking at Tobias Harris's contract and comparing it to the production, and we're like, So it's like that's the issue when it comes to Tobias Harris. But I don't think anybody's going to be knocking down your door to get their hands on Tobias Harris. It's so funny, and it's ironic, right, that they matched up with Jimmy Butler. And it's ironic that, to a degree, you could argue maybe they chose Tobias over Jimmy on some level. I think it's more so a Ben Simmons situation where, Jimmy and Ben Simmons maybe weren't coexisting. And, Ben Simmons obviously wanted the ball in his hand. They catered and tried to appease Ben Simmons. And the reality is, and, Joel Embiid talked about it. Remember, Joel Embiid talked about that earlier in the year. We traded away Jimmy Butler, and, he felt it was a mistake at the time. And clearly it's a mistake. It's a mistake. It's clear-cut mistake. It's a clear mistake. They tried to bring in Al Horford. That didn't work. That fell apart. And because Al Horford at that point in his career was a center. And they tried to put him at power forward. Al Horford is a center. And he's in Boston, turning back the clock, right? Dunking on Giannis, doing some amazing things. Didn't do it in Philadelphia. And I think that was a byproduct of him just being out of position. But the Sixers, they have to, at this point, it's all championship or bust. It's all championship or bust. And Joel Embiid just said what I just said, right? Talking about Jimmy Butler. Embiid with a lot of praise for Jimmy Butler. And then, I still don't know how we let him go. Man, Embiid is still lamenting them getting rid of Joel Embiid. Not Joel Embiid, getting rid of Jimmy Butler. Says it again. I still don't know how we let him go. That's a tough pill to swallow, man. That's a championship piece. That's a guy with a championship mentality, championship heart, championship effort, championship energy, and championship talent. And he's been to the NBA Finals, led Miami to the NBA Finals in 2020, now in the conference finals this year. Yeah, how do you let him go? How do you let him go? And I don't know if that's, them choosing him or Brett Brown over him, or is that choosing Ben Simmons over him? But no matter who you chose over him, it's a mistake. Jimmy Butler still should be a Philadelphia 76er. Jimmy Butler still should be wearing a 76ers uniform. Jimmy Butler and Joel Embiid still should be together. I don't know how he's right. He's right. And maybe when we look at the Embiid years in Philadelphia, many years from now, we might say to ourselves, it all went wrong, right? It seemed like they had all the pieces together. They acquired Jimmy Butler in that Covington and Dario Saric trade from Minnesota. You get that, okay? Then you acquire Tobias Harris. And you're saying at that point, man, Tobias, Jimmy, Ben, Joel, JJ Redick at the time, and you're saying, okay, this team, I think they were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They were somewhere looking at that starting lineup with Embiid and Butler and Harris and Redick and Joel Embiid. That starting lineup together. And that starting lineup together, right, had success, and ultimately they took the Toronto Raptors to 7 games. And I believe they were the only team that took Toronto to 7 games in that particular season because Toronto beat Golden State in 6. I believe they beat Milwaukee in 6 as well. Then they beat the Sixers in 7. And it took a miraculous, crazy, amazing shot by Kawhi Leonard for that to happen. But man, you look at that year, look at 2019, and again, my thought was let's run it back. That was my initial thought. Run it back. Run it back. Run it back. Ben, Jimmy, Tobias, and Ben Simmons. Run it back. And that was my initial thought at the time. And, clearly that didn't happen. Clearly, Elton Brand, and we could blame Elton Brand, but you could argue at that point, that time, that was Brett Brown's organization because Brian Colangelo, he was gone. They did hire Elton, but, I think Brett Brown had a lot to say at that point in the organization. And then you could argue, the whole situation with Brian Colangelo kind of set this team back because, it happened out of nowhere. And, they were forced to make some moves in the front office out of nowhere. And at the time, Brett Brown, again, had a lot of power in the organization. And we get what we get. We get what we get. And Ben Simmons, never materialized, never grew his game on the offensive end, never turned into the player that they wanted him to be, right? And so we all know what happened there. And so now, you're looking over at the Miami bench, you're like, wow, who would you rather have, James Harden or Jimmy Butler? I think that, again, rhetorical question. It's a rhetorical question at this point. So it's like you blew it. And will Embiid ever get a teammate like Jimmy Butler again? I don't know if Harden's that guy. Because Jimmy Butler, two-way player at an elite level, two-way player at an elite level. Very good defender. And obviously, clearly, a guy that can get the ball and to put the ball in the basket and get his shots off the bounce, right? And get at a high level. We didn't see that from James Harden in this series. We didn't see a guy who could, get a shot at an elite level. We didn't see that. Clearly, we didn't see it on the defensive end either, but we never expected to see that part. So it's like, man, Joel is looking and watching Jimmy Butler do what Jimmy Butler did in this series, and he's saying right now, he's longing to have that dude on his roster. He loved Jimmy Butler. Embiid loved Jimmy Butler. And again, I still don't know how we let him go. His words. Those are his words. But Embiid said that, but you can replace Embiid with Tyler Flores or Andrew Klein. I mean, you can replace Embiid with any of these names. Any Sixers fans, name, and they would say the same thing. They would say the same exact thing. Right? I still don't know how we let him go. They would still be saying those exact words. Still be saying those exact words. And again, and here's the funny part. Here's the thing, right? That was the perfect role for Ben Simmons. The role that he had when Jimmy Butler was on the roster. Perfect role. Be a role player, basically. Focus on your defense. Get your assists. Score a little, but we don't need your points. We're not banking on your points. Score a little. Defend your butt off. Do some of the dirty work. Rebound. Facilitate from time to time. Facilitate for most of the time. That's what the Sixers needed from Ben Simmons. And that will be the role that he will have in Brooklyn. Ironically enough, that's the role that he's going to have in Brooklyn. And that was the role that he had when Jimmy Butler was here in 2019. It turned out to be the perfect role for Ben Simmons. You didn't need his points. You wanted them, but you didn't need them. Last year, Sixers needed his points. They needed him to be more. They needed him to be more in Game 7 against the Atlanta Hawks. And when they asked for more, they wanted more, they couldn't get more because he didn't have it to give. He didn't have it to give. And now, again, one more time again, Joel Embiid's lamenting the fact that Jimmy Butler is in Miami. Joel Embiid still don't know how we let him go. Still can't figure out how Jimmy Butler is not on the Sixers. Still can't figure it out. Well, it is reality. It is what it is. And because of Jimmy Butler, because of his play, because of the things that he does, you're going home. You're going home. And again. And Embiid said this earlier. He said in the training camp too, when it came to Jimmy Butler. Still, was a mistake to let him go. Still talking about it. And, reality is he's going to have to get over it. And the reality is, it is what it is. You're stuck with James Harden. Could be a good thing. So far, it appears to be not so good of a thing. But all that, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the offseason. They got a long summer in Philadelphia. A long summer to figure it out. Figure out what's next. Figure out the future. Embiid, again, came into this year in tip-top shape. Put up big-time numbers. Did some big-time things. But at the end of the day, Sixers needed him in the second round, the first two games, and he was unavailable. At the end of the day, we've seen this numerous times. This same script when it comes to Embiid and his injury history. We've seen it before. This is not a new script. This is a rerun. We've seen this before. And so, the Sixers, the season's over. The Heat move on. Philly goes home. The Heat go on to try to win an NBA title. The Sixers go home trying to figure out what they need to do to get to an Eastern Conference final, to get out of the second round, and to win an NBA title. Do they bring back Doc Rivers? Probably so, but who knows what can happen. They bring back James Harden. James Harden said he'll be here. He'll probably be back. Maxey, definitely a lot of promise. High character. Seems to put the work in. I think you're happy there. And I think he's only going to get better. He's only going to elevate, I believe. And Embiid, again, you want this guy to continue to put in the work. It seems like he finally gets it in terms of, being in tip-top shape and staying in shape. He did say having a kid did help that. But, sometimes in life, we get it, but we sometimes get it when it's too late. And you wish Embiid had this mentality in 2019 when they had Jimmy Butler, when they had an opportunity to do some big things where things opened up for them to possibly win an NBA title that year. You wish he had that mentality. You wish. And he has the mentality now, and he's 28, he's going to be 28 years old. 28 years old now, I believe. 28 now, be 29, during next season. But and still in his prime, still playing at an elite level. But you wish he would have got it in 2019. Again, it's not too late. It's definitely not too late. He's still, maybe the best center in this league. He's still an MVP caliber player. Still an elite guy. Still a superstar. But still has to get healthy and stay healthy and be healthy forever and ever. Or at least during the playoffs. So Embiid asked if he still believes in the coaching staff. says yes, emphasizes, you can't keep pointing fingers at management and coaches. Sometimes the players simply have to be better. So he's taking full ownership, right? He's taking full ownership, um, and saying, you know what, we got to be better. And he's right. I mean, this is game 6, right? How much motivation do you need in game 6 with your backs against the wall down 3-2? How much motivation do you need? How much motivation do you need? It's easy to blame other people. It's always easy to look at others instead of looking at yourself, right? It's always easy to point the finger there, point the finger over there, point the finger over there, and point the finger over there. The hard part, and why it's difficult for some people to make progress in life, is the hard part is looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, yo, I messed up. Yo, I wasn't good enough. Yo, my effort wasn't right. Like, that's the hard part. That's the hard part. That is the hard part. You can't, and for Embiid to say, you know what, to point at himself, to point at everybody else, the players, and not the coaches, not management, it's what you like to hear. And obviously, you wouldn't expect him to throw the coaching staff under the bus anyway. Not in this spot, not in this situation. Max has seemed frustrated with Harden and Doc throughout the series. Hopefully, it's just competitive and nothing too big to worry about. I don't think it's anything to worry about. I know they showed that clip where Maxey kind of walked away from Harden on the bench, but if you look at the clip, it appeared that one of the coaches, I think it was Sam Cassell, called him over to talk to him. That's why he did that. So I don't think that's an issue. And again, Maxey, a huge leap in year 2, and you're hoping for him to make an even bigger leap in year 4. The work that he put in was good. It's evident. His shot was better. He put in a lot of work in the offseason, and that was clear. He put in a lot of work. A lot of work. And so Embiid, again, didn't blame the coaches, didn't blame management. Players just have to be better. And yes, they have to be better. Sixers have to be better. They have to be better. And Doc said earlier in the post-game press conference, he concluded that Miami was the better team. That was his conclusion at the end of the series. I will say this: last year, when the series ended against the Atlanta Hawks, I walked away from that series personally saying the better team didn't win. The Sixers were the better team. They just blew it. They were better than Atlanta last year, and they blew it. Blew the 20-point lead in Game 5. They blew it. Losing in Game 7 in your building. Blew it. Like, I thought the Sixers were the better basketball team. They just blew it. This year, I guess I'm comfortable with saying Miami's better. Miami's better. I'm comfortable saying that, but like I said, I do wonder if Embiid was available in games 1 and 2 and completely healthy in terms of the facial fracture, but he still had the thumb. But it seemed like he figured that part out. It seemed like he figured the thumb part out. And I'm not saying who knows what the orbital bone and the effect that it had on him. I was screaming at the time in Game 6 against the Raptors. Before that play happened, I was screaming to get the starters out. They were in complete control at the time. And Doc left them in, and he left them in, and Embiid, I think it was a lay-in he made. The little plane there, running down the court with his arms wide out, like running down the court like this and everything. And then Siakam comes through, busts him in the face with an elbow, and Embiid gets concussed, and ultimately, fractures an orbital bone, and the rest is history. Misses Game 1 and 2 in Miami. They basically get blown out in Games 1 and 2, and he comes back in 3 and 4. You were excited, you were happy that, again, maybe they could turn this thing around. So, tied it at 2. And then it was just dud 5, dudding 6. And we're here right now lamenting and talking about the Sixers. Joel Embiid. Embiid said his focus this summer, aside from getting better, is on appreciating what he has. I got home 2 days ago and got the best word I can. Most valuable father. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, I don't think fans really care about that too much, but at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. Like, look, at the end of the day, you being a good father, you being a good dad, you handling your business as a father, you handling your business as a dad, you taking care of your children, taking care of your seeds, and all the other good stuff. Sure, that's what you're supposed to do. That's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. But they always say, you shouldn't be applauded for things that you're supposed to do, right? And you're supposed, in theory, if you have kids, you're supposed to take care of them. In theory, if you have kids, you're supposed to pour into them, valuable things and be around them and love on them and all that good stuff. So you're supposed to do, in theory, right? So they always say you should be applauded for things that you're supposed to do, right? And, in terms of him getting better, I guess at the end of the day, that's what he's getting paid to do. They pay you with the thought, with the belief that, you know what? He's going to continue to elevate, elevate, elevate. He's going to stay in shape. He's going to be in shape. He's going to do what he's got to do to help this team be successful. You expect all that. You give a guy a bunch of money. Just like you expect an individual, when they make a baby, to be a good father or a good mother. And so, we can't applaud. Do we applaud people for doing what they're supposed to do? I guess the reality is because there's so many people, so many fathers who are not doing what they're supposed to do. The ones who are, get celebrated, and rightfully so. You should be celebrated for, you should be celebrated for handling your business, doing what you got to do. I don't know about that, but again, it's always good to be the most valuable father he can be, and I hope he continues to be the most valuable father. And next year, hopefully, he could be the most valuable player as well, to go along with being the most valuable father. And more importantly, come playoff time, he's even more valuable in the playoffs and leading this team to amazing and big, great things. So again, when you put it all in perspective, yeah, sure. Family is important. Family is everything. Family is number one. Winning basketball games is cool, it's exciting, it's fun, and it's what you want to do. But more importantly, as he said, you want to be the best father you can be. And hopefully Embiid is doing that, as well as staying in shape, as well as being better, as well as doing all the things he can do to lead this team to an NBA title. That is the hope, that is the goal, that is the dream for Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. But again, season's over. The season is over. A season that, there was some turmoil in the beginning with Ben Simmons. A season that, Joel Embiid carried this team for periods of the season. A season that saw them get James Harden and the excitement that he brought to the city for that short period of time. And a season like 2020. Well, like last year, like 2 seasons before that, will end in the second round. Can't get to the third round of the Eastern Conference Finals. The last time that happened, Allen Iverson, Dikembe Mutombo, Aaron McKee, Eric Snow, and those boys led the Philadelphia 76ers to the NBA Finals, where Allen Iverson, 48 big points, stepping over Ty Lue. Got one finals game against the Lakers. Actually, that's the only game the Lakers lost in the playoffs that year. So, I mean, I guess it's what? I guess it's something, right? Moral victory. You get one. No one beat the Lakers that year. So, that's the last time the Sixers made the Eastern Conference Finals. And we'll see what happens in terms of getting back to that point. It's not happening this year, clearly, after what happened tonight. And maybe it'll happen next year. Who knows? Guys got to get better. Guys have to get right. And, Tyler Flores, I think with a full off season to get healthy and train, then a full season with the team, Harden will feel more comfortable running the offense. And that is the hope. That is the hope, and I don't think that's out of realm of possibility. You're obviously not happy in terms of Harden's inability to get by guys. You're clearly not happy with Harden's, taking only 9 shots in this game. But maybe that's a part of, like you said, being comfortable in the offense, being comfortable with his teammates, being comfortable with everybody, right? Maybe that's a part of that, getting in and figuring out, what, I was a little, I don't want to say timid or to get involved and to be aggressive, but for whatever reason, I just, didn't or wasn't as aggressive as maybe I should have been or maybe as I want to be. And maybe that comes with a full off season and a full training camp and him being completely healthy, because I don't know if he was completely healthy. I don't know. If you're a Sixers fan, you're hoping that he wasn't completely healthy, because if he is completely healthy, then he's lost a step. Clearly lost a step. So you're hoping that maybe, he wasn't completely 100% healthy. You're hoping that was the case, and you're hoping with a full training camp, you're hoping with him being, in better shape, tip-top shape, big-time shape, that things will be different and that this situation will be different and that Philadelphia will be able to make some noise next season. We'll see what happens. Again, Embiid, 28 years old, will be 29 next March. How many more years do you have of that where he's playing at an elite level? Maybe 2, 3, 4 more years of that, right? And at some point it's going to slow down. So the window is open, but the window with Embiid in terms of him and his health and in terms of him, being a superstar caliber player, who knows? Because, you always look at the injuries when it comes to this guy. You always look at the injuries. And again, fluky situation in terms of the injuries this year. But again, an injury is an injury. Health is health. Availability is availability. And again, he wasn't available in games 1 and 2. And it may have cost him this series. May have been one of the reasons they lost this series. And I think you have to point to it. Because again, you would think, or they would have the chance or the ability to steal one if he was healthy for those games. But he wasn't. And, and that's that. That is that. I mean, Joel Embiid, is he running out of excuses as we see here? Running out of excuses for not getting it done in Philly? I think we have to talk about that for sure. He's the constant. He's the one constant that's here. So we have to talk about that, yes. The excuses are he is running out. We talk about, shout out to Joel Embiid, fractured face, torn thumb ligament, leads playoffs in double-doubles, 24 points, 11 rebounds, gave his all. Sure, he gave his all, without a doubt. But he came up short. And that sounds good, that sounds great, that sounds amazing. But at the end of the day, he came up short. At the end of the day, he couldn't get the team out of the second round. At the end of the day, Sixers are going home. And that's that. But we'll see what happens with this team in the offseason. Should be an interesting offseason. Should be a fun offseason. We'll see what the Sixers do to improve, to get better, and to ultimately get to the point where they are a champion. So make sure you make sure you subscribe to the channel, support the channel, like the video. We'll be back here throughout the course of these playoffs, talking NBA playoffs. The Sixers lose 99-90. The Miami Heat move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Philadelphia 76ers go home. I'm out of here. See you later.